Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we are going to be looking at the weekly metagame breakdown for the Explore Best of One format. We haven't covered Explore in a couple weeks now, kind of taking a look to see if anything from Aether Drift actually found its way into the format. Relatively speaking, Aether Drift has been somewhat of a lower power set compared to something like Duskmourn that really kind of added a bunch of cards to the format. But we're going to take a look at what's being played on Untapped right now. Tracker tool that combines users' win rates, gives us these stats. You can track your own win rates. If you want to use Untapped, the link is in the video description. But I will timestamp and paste these deck lists in the video description as well, so you can copy paste to your heart's content. We're going to start off looking at the popularity of the day, just kind of seeing what people are playing on the ladder in terms of volumes, and then we'll look at the win rates themselves. Notable thing, it is March 3rd, so the ladder reset about 2 days ago. So everyone that was Mythic got reset to Platinum. As such, looking at just kind of the distribution here, we're going to look Platinum to Mythic, but in terms of the win rates, we'll look Diamond to Mythic just because it looks at a week as opposed to just a day, and that'll cover us towards the end of last month as well for folks that were kind of ranking up. So Rakdos Demons is the most played deck at about 18%. Gruul Aggro coming in at 17%. This is like a bushwhack kind of Gruul deck. There's also some Innkeeper Talent Mice versions, similar to the standard deck that are popping up in Pioneer. We have Azorius Control at 8%, Phoenix at 5%, Selesnya Death and Taxes at 5%, Angels at about 5%, and then just kind of Ninjas and Sacrifice. Looking in terms of like play rate, Demons is one of the highest played rate decks, but we see the Gruul Aggro deck kind of coming out of left field. It was at like 7 and now it's at 16, 17%, so about a 10% increase in terms of the deck. We also see an increase of Azorius Control kind of week over week. So looking into it, like I said, Diamond and Mythic rank 95, just a shade under 10,000 games that were played. We're looking at the 35 game cap. And then Azorius Control is the highest played deck, or highest win rate deck, 78%. And I think this one does a good job of adapting its tools for the best of one meta. A lot of times people will just copy paste a blanket kind of control deck. The thing with control is you really need to modify your flex spots to address what the meta is. The meta being a little bit more aggressive in best of one, you see cards like Knockout Blow, which is not normally something you'd see in a best of 3 format in that slot. It's usually a sideboard card, but just this being 1 mana to kill a red creature, deals 4 damage to it, you gain 2 life, just does a lot of things you want in this format. You'll also see kind of the removal package. No Supreme Verdict, opting to have turn 3 sweepers, and then Sunfall Farewell on the top end, being mindful of the enchantment exile that it doesn't hit your lockdown. You have cheap removal, March of Otherworldly Light, Get Lost, change the equation, censor, and then kind of a deduce as your card advantage. No more lies in here. One thing to keep in mind as well, deduce temporary lockdown. Deduce makes a token, which will get swept up by lockdown. You may want to play Think Twice in this spot. It does a similar kind of idea, but it can play it out of your graveyard. You also have Deluge, 1 of Beza on the main, just to help you stabilize some life. Wandering Emperors, 1 to Fairy on the top end. You got a bunch of utility lands here, Fountain Port, Restless Anchorage, your channel lands, a hall is your win condition, a couple fields as well, and then Kahira, the Orphan Guard. I'm personally of the opinion in best of one, it's actually better to not play Kahira. Kahira pretty much always signals, I am playing control. That allows your opponent to have some information in terms of how they are sideboarding. The big draw of control is if you look at this deck, really the only thing that, like, if they keep a hand of like Fatal Push, like Go for the Throats, stuff like that, it doesn't really do much against you. But if you see Kahira, they're going to mulligan that away typically. And then this isn't like it closes out the game on its own. This is like it can, but it's pretty weak relative to some of the other companions. Like at least Yorion gets you like 5 for 1 value or something, but that's my opinion. Let me know what you think about that. So an interesting one here, Mono Green Elves, 75%. Precursor, I say this for a lot of decks in this nature. I think this is maybe lower MMR. I don't think Elves is a great deck to invest in because a lot of the cards only work in that deck. You're going to be spending a lot of wild cards. There's a couple questionable choices in this one as well. So I'm sharing this list so you can see if you want to modify it, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend. Tree 3 3 Tree City should just be Nykthos Shrine to Nyx. If you're going to be playing that kind of big mana sink, it doesn't require you to have a heavy board state, and it just looks off devotion, where this one doesn't really produce anything until you have like net creatures, right? Like with Nykthos, this is adding 2 mana, whereas with 3 Tree City, it was only adding 1. You should be playing a Beseju. You should probably be playing like maybe 1 Castle Garenberg, maybe 2. So little things like that in terms of the mana base. The core of this one, you have your elf package, so Elvish Mystic, Line of War Elves, War Master in here is a mana sink. You have Leaf Crown Visionary that can draw you cards, but make a lot of tokens. Elvish Archdruid generates a lot of mana. You could feed that into Genesis Wave to throw down a bunch of permanents from your library. You could also have Tyvar as a way to pump your mana to give a bonus in terms of power. Collected Company helps you hit your creatures. There's a couple like odd choices here. Elven Ambush, just 4 mana. You could technically make a lot of elves, but this is kind of like, if you already have a big enough board, you're probably already doing well to just add more. 4 mana is a lot of mana. And then Storm the Seed Core. It can give trample. It's kind of that like Craterhoof that you're missing in this format. But again, like 4 mana, it's not the best card on its own right. So little things to keep in mind there. 5-color Niv, the opposite of a budget deck. So one thing here, if we look, you're starting to see some of the verges see play. This deck has a lot of ways to turn on the verges, so it allows you to have these kind of like painless lands where before you'd have to play a higher density of shock lands. Can I tell you if one of each of the shocks is correct? Probably not, but they did the math, so we don't have to. This deck here is looking to use Bring to Light to kind of tutor for cards, cast them for free. Couple cool interactions. Bring to Light with Valky lets you cast the Tybalt side, but it's almost like a toolbox. You can get Niv-Mizzet Reborn to get your card advantage, Supreme to rebuy stuff in the graveyard. You have Omnath in a pinch, situational removals, sweepers, kind of effects like that. You also have Sylvan Caryatid that helps you ramp ahead. This provides you color fixing, early blockers, and hexproof super relevant to commit early in that sense. Up the Beanstalk lets you draw cards off your kind of bigger end threats. So the Vanishing Verse is cheap removal, Pillage the Bog for card advantage, Helix, got a bunch of cheap counters kind of mixed in. Fable ties the room together. Nahiri is just another way to kind of cheat out stuff, some removal, flexible card in that respect. Yorion sideboard, or companion. We then have Esper Greasefang. So this deck here is going to use still the Greasefang package, but it's got the backup with Abhorrent Oculus. So you have the ability with this deck. You have Greasefang, you have Oculus, you have Can't Stay Awake and Recommission to bring them back. You're not doing Helping Hand because you want Greasefang untapped so it can crew the vehicles. We got the cool art Parhelion or Sky Sovereign here. The one thing you might want to try with these lists as well, I was playing it a bit. Valor Flagship could be also another interesting one. The 7/7 that gives you lifelink just to kind of in the race. This version compared to the Mardu one has a little bit more churn, but it doesn't have as much of a fair game plan. You're a little bit more all in on the combo route. Faithful Mending does a good job of bridging you, gains you some life, lets you kind of curate your hand. The Stubborn Denial can be useful. Both of these have the 4+ toughness, so it just becomes uncounterable or counter any non-creature for 1 mana, which is nice. Gaze, like a lot of kind of curating effects to kind of get that combo in place. Moving on, we go to Rakdos Leyline. So this is mono red Leyline. You have Leyline of Residence. If you're a skilled gamer, this is always in your opener. And just a bunch of pump effects with things that when they die, they deal extra damage. So Scamp can fling itself, deals double damage, Fireblade Charger, Heartfire Hero. So a bunch of pump effects, and then you could fling them at your opponent to deal damage, or just have them naturally die and your opponent takes damage that way there. Swift Sphere is the only non-fling effect. It's a pretty budget deck if you have the mana base. All these are uncommons, except for the Leyline. Monstrous Rage, Thud is another sacrifice effect, Infuriate as a pump effect. You have Titan Strength as pump effect, Turn Inside Out as a pump effect. We then have Mardu Greasefang. So this version here, a little bit more mid-rangey focused. You have the Fables, you can play the fair game plan of like Fable, Fear of Missing Out, Thoughtseize, Fatal Push, Torch the Tower. Bitter Triumph lets you discard and kind of use that effect. Overlord of the Balemark mills you and then helps find you your pieces. So this version, you could get stuff back with Overlord, but you don't have the reanimation effect. Same top end. You also have Nahiri here that can potentially cheat out some of your vehicles as well. But just kind of like a mid-range deck that has like a, oops, I just cheated out a big creature, a big vehicle, and kill you that way there. Then we go to Gruul Aggro. So this is the Bushwhack version. So this one's just a shade under 70%. This one here, red aggro. So you have your pieces, Heartfire Hero, Kumano, Swiss Spear, a couple Monstrous Rage, Play with Fire. But you have kind of this plot package. So Aloe Alchemist and Cunning Coyote both have the plot effect where you can cast them on a second turn, which is meaningful for when you cast a second spell this turn, gets you the Reckless Bushwhacker ability, but it also gives you an immediate effect, which is nice. Not all plot cards give you an effect the turn they come down. So with something like Burning Tree Emissary, you could Burning Tree, plot Cunning Coyote, and then when it enters, or this one only gives you the effect when it comes in. The Aloe Alchemist will give you the effect, so it gives a creature +3/2 and trample, but you can go like Burning Tree into Cunning Coyote, give it haste, so it kind of chains together, pushes through some damage. The Aloe Alchemist can also just pump your smaller stuff, which works for the Valiant trigger as well for Heartfire. Tarkus Command is kind of your over the top, but you can set up turns where you just chain together multiple creatures. Bushwhack has the Surge ability. It's basically if you cast another spell, you can cast for 2 mana and it gives your team haste. So just a strong kind of effect in that regard. We then go to Selesnya Death and Taxes, Selesnya Company. So this is a curve that makes a mono red deck scared. Just all 3 drops made part from the Elf package, just helping you dig. This deck here has both Collected Company and Kayla's to cheat out stuff. The Enduring Innocence, very strong in terms of pulling together creatures for you. This one's a Yorion version, which is kind of wild. I was going to say this looks like way more cards than usual. They usually don't play like Sanguine Evangelist in this or Knight of Autumn in the main. So if you want to do a 60 card version, you can cut these. They usually don't play Voice of Resurgence in the main either, but this one's going a little bit bigger. Bunch of cheap kind of like creature removal effects, tax effects. Archon of Emeria is usually a card you see in these decks, which I'm surprised we don't see in this version. Helps against like Lotus, Phoenix, just kind of taxing some of your opponent's decks. So actually really good against the mono red prowess deck that wants to play multiple spells per turn. You kind of stymie what they're able to do there. From one Selesnya deck to the other, we have Angels at 62%. So similar idea, but your Kayla's and Collected Company into ETB effects. Bishop of Wings and Righteous Valkyrie care about Angels coming into play to gain you life. Payoff to that is obviously Righteous Valkyrie giving an anthem, but Resplendent Angel making multiple bodies. Skyclave Apparition as removal, Inspiring Overseer, card draw, and life gain. All kind of mixed in. So that's the Angels deck there. I had Esper Greasefang twice. We have Mono Green Devotion, so 61%. So the card we got is Oath to Nissa. You could do the like Nicol Bolas lines if you want to cheat out Nicol Bolas. You could technically do it with Doubling Season now that it's legal. But basically just helps you dig for lands, creatures. But you have the Leyline of Guildpact here where it can turn on Nykthos, just generate extra devotion. Your kind of game plan with this one, generate a whole bunch of mana, get Uvenwald Oddity out, you flip Uvenwald, it can haste your team out that turn, and just push through large chunks of damage that way there. Trailblazer and Kiora both draw you cards, and then Storm the Festival is kind of the big payoff on the top end. No longer with Karn in this format because of the band. One more Selesnya deck, we have Auras. Very powerful historic deck being Boros, but in Pioneer it goes with Selesnya. You don't get Amped Raptor, some of the other cards. But this here you have both Shram and Light Paws that care about Auras coming into play. This allows you to kind of either tutor toolbox effects or just draw extra cards. And then you have Gladecover Scout, Hexproof 1-drop. Very hard to deal with. They basically need an Edict effect or a Sweeper. And then you have things like Audacity to give it Trample, Power Boost, Cartouche gives multiple bodies, Ethereal Armor scales it, Flying, Optimistic Scavenger can distribute counters, Sentinel's Eye for Vigilance, Shardmage Rescue for protection, Tamiyo's Safekeeping for protection, All That Glitters scales damage, Alpha Authority gives hexproof as well. And then lastly, Rakdos Demons, just the latest iteration of a Rakdos mid deck. Fable, Harvester keeps on going with Thoughtseize and Push. Blade of Oni as a demon that works with Unholy Annex, so you can go Blade into Annex and start draining and gaining while drawing cards. Shelly on the top end. This one's on a Trespasser, Withering Torment, just a bunch of removal, good Rakdos cards, grind them out. The Unholy Annex can kind of let you continue 1-for-1ing your opponent while you keep drawing more and more cards. So that is it for the week. Let me know what you've been playing, what you've been liking, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching.